They will tell you she was stolen, a captive in a realm of shadow. But what if the shadows were not a prison, but a throne?
Listen closely to the silence, for that is where true magic whispers.
Tonight, the stars tell a different story. Not of a stolen maiden, but of a queen who chose her crown. Listen to the echo of Persephone.
There is a truth deeper than the roots of any mountain, a magic older than the first star. It is the law of balance. For every blinding sun, there must be a cooling shadow. For every song that fills the air, a silence that holds its memory. A soul cannot truly know the light until it has walked willingly into the dark. And for the goddess they called Kore, the maiden of spring, the dark was waiting, not as a predator, but as a destiny.
They called me Kore, the maiden, a name that felt less like an identity and more like a title, a role I was born to play. My world was a performance, staged upon the fertile earth for an audience of mortals and gods. I was a symbol, a season, a promise of life. My mother, Demeter, the great Earth Mother, would guide me through the meadows, her hand a constant, unyielding presence on my arm. When my bare feet touched the soil, crocuses and asphodels would erupt in my wake. The mortals would fall to their knees in gratitude, and my mother would smile, a smile as bright and possessive as the midday sun. Her love was the sun. It nurtured, it gave life, it commanded growth. But the sun, without shadow, can burn. It can parch the very earth it seeks to bless. I was her most prized flower, kept in a garden of her own making. Every waking moment was a lesson in my duty to smile, to dance, to bloom on command. I learned the names of 1,000 flowers, the songs of 1,000 birds, but I never learned the name of the girl who lived behind my eyes. Inside this perfect, sun-drenched cage, a single defiant seed of shadow took root in my soul. It yearned not for death, but for stillness, for a silence that was not empty, but full, for a darkness that did not consume, but cradled. But how does a seed of shadow find its soil in a world of endless light? It waits. It listens for a crack in the perfection, a note of discord in the symphony of life. It listens for the sound of a different kind of kingdom. It happened on a day like any other, a day of suffocating beauty. I was in the fields of Nysa, weaving garlands of narcissus, the air thick with their cloying perfume. The nymphs laughed and sang, their voices a chorus of practiced joy. And then the music stopped. Not just the singing, but the world itself. The buzzing of the bees, the rustling of the leaves, the very heartbeat of the earth fell silent. It was not a violent silence. It was a profound, resonant quiet, as if the universe had drawn a single deep breath. The ground before me did not tremble or break. It parted, like a curtain of black velvet, revealing a chasm that did not lead to fire, but to a cool, inviting darkness. From that fissure in reality, he emerged, not in a storm of terror, but on a chariot of polished obsidian, drawn by horses the color of midnight. He was a presence cloaked in ancient sorrow and profound authority, the lord of the underworld, Hades. The nymphs screamed, they scattered like startled birds, but I was frozen, not by fear, but by a strange magnetic awe. His eyes, the color of a starless night, did not burn with lust or conquest as the other gods did. They held a stillness, a deep and aching loneliness that resonated with the seed of shadow inside me. He did not look at Kore, the maiden, the prize to be won. He looked at me, at the girl behind the eyes. And for the first time in my eternal life, I felt seen.
He offered a hand, a simple gesture, an invitation. There was no threat in it, only a question that my entire existence had been waiting for. My mother's lessons, the smiles, the duty, they all screamed for me to run. But the silent, shadowy part of my soul, it whispered for me to stay, to see what lay beyond the sun.
And in that moment, the world fractures. You feel the ground give way, not in terror, but in a strange, willing surrender. The air grows cold, smelling not of flowers, but of damp earth, of petrichor, of ancient stone. You see the hand offered before you, a promise of a kingdom where silence is not a void, but a language. You are not being pulled, you are letting go. One step, a single choice that unmakes a world and begins a universe.
I do not remember taking his hand. I only remember the sensation of falling, not through air, but through time itself. The world of light, of endless, suffocating green, vanished above me, a shrinking circle of a life I was already beginning to forget. And as the darkness enveloped me, I felt not the cold terror of a captive, but the thrilling, terrifying peace of a soul finally on its way home.
The maiden of spring was gone. The world above would weep and wither in her absence. But in the heart of the earth, a different kind of seed was about to be planted. For the descent into the underworld is, first and foremost, a descent into oneself. And it is only in the deepest darkness that one can discover the true nature of one's own light.
The descent ended not with a crash, but with a whisper. The air, once thick with the scent of damp earth, now held a clean, mineral coolness, like a cave after a rainstorm. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the empty silence of absence I had felt on the surface, but a living, breathing quiet. It was filled with the soft, rustling sound of 1,000,000 billion memories, the collective sigh of every soul that had ever lived. This was the underworld, and it was not the pit of despair the Olympians had painted in their garish tales. There was no fire, no brimstone, no chorus of eternal torment. There was peace, a profound, unshakable stillness that calmed the frantic beating of my heart for the first time in memory.
Hades led me from his chariot. Before us lay his kingdom. The great river Styx flowed not with water, but with liquid obsidian, its surface reflecting a starless sky. Along its banks walked the shades, the souls of the departed. They were not screaming specters, but silent, luminous figures, each a story in itself, flowing in a gentle, unending procession towards their final rest. It was not a place of punishment. It was a library of all that had ever been.
For what is a flower but a fleeting promise of beauty, destined to wither and be forgotten? And what is a gem buried deep within the earth but a promise kept for eternity? In the profound silence of the underworld, the Maiden of Spring began to hear her own voice. In the patient darkness, she began to see her own brilliant light.
Hades was not my jailer. He was my guide. He showed me his realm, not with the boastful pride of a conqueror, but with the quiet dignity of a lonely custodian. He led me through fields where nothing grew, yet the ground itself shimmered with untold riches. The fields of Asphodel were not fields of flowers, but meadows of pale, ethereal light, where the souls of ordinary men and women found their quiet eternity. He showed me the caverns where raw, uncut jewels bloomed in the rock like frozen starlight, diamonds like captured tears, rubies like the heart of a dying sun. The wealth of the world above is fleeting, he said, his voice a low rumble like the shifting of tectonic plates. Gold is melted, crops wither, but these are forever. He saw beauty not in the transient, but in the eternal.
One day, he took me to the gates of Tartarus, a bronze maw in the earth from which I could feel the rage of the Titans chained in the abyss. "This is what I guard," he told me, his gaze fixed on the darkness. Not the dead, but the living from this. He was not a king of death. He was a warden against chaos. And then he took me to Elysium, a hidden valley of impossible peace where the heroes of old rested in perpetual twilight. And there, for the first time, I felt the familiar pull of my power, not the riotous bloom of spring, but something deeper. A single ghostly lily bloomed at my touch, its petals glowing with a soft silver light. It was a flower of memory, of peace. It was not my mother's power, borrowed and performed. It was mine. Here, in the land of the dead, I learned I could create a different kind of life. The sun above teaches a seed to reach for the light, to grow loud and vibrant. But it is the darkness below that teaches a seed its true strength, how to anchor itself, how to draw sustenance from the deep, silent earth, how to build a foundation so strong that no storm can ever break it. Days bled into weeks, weeks into a timeless expanse. Hades never once laid a hand on me. He never made a demand. He simply talked to me. He asked me questions no one had ever asked. Not what flowers I would bloom, but what thoughts I cultivated in the garden of my mind. Not what songs I could sing, but what truths I heard in the silence. He listened. Olympus was a pantheon of monologues, of gods posturing and declaring their own greatness. But Hades listened. In his quiet kingdom, he treated my words as if they were jewels he had just unearthed. He told me of the laws of his realm, of the balance between endings and beginnings. He spoke of the weight of his crown, the solitude of his duty. He did not see me as a prize to be displayed. He saw me as a potential ally, a mind to consult, a presence to fill the crushing silence of his eternal duty. One evening, by the banks of the river Lethe, whose waters erase all memory, he looked at me. "My kingdom has a king," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "But it has no heart. It has no one to speak for the silent, to remember the forgotten. It has no queen. He did not offer me a cage, even one gilded with the treasures of the earth. He offered me a throne beside his, a partnership. He did not ask me to be his possession. He asked me to be his equal. He did not ask me to bloom for him. He asked me to rule with him." And in that moment, I understood. The seed of shadow within me wasn't a flaw. It was a root that had finally found its soil. Here, my power was not a performance. It was a purpose. Here, my voice mattered. Here, my choices had weight. Here, in the kingdom of the end, my own story could finally begin.
Peace, like all things, has a price. While I found my purpose in the stillness of the underworld, the world above descended into chaos. I could feel it, even in the deepest caverns. A tremor of agony that ran through the very stone. My mother's grief. Demeter had choked the earth in a shroud of ice and famine. The laughter of mortals had turned to pleas, their prayers to curses. She was holding the world hostage for the return of her perfect porcelain doll. She was punishing the living for a loss she could not comprehend. So it is with the greatest powers. The love that gives life, when twisted by grief, can become the frost that brings death. Demeter, in her sorrow, forgot the first law of any garden. A seed, to truly grow, must be allowed to leave the hand that planted it. The summons came not as a request, but as a crack of thunder that echoed even in the halls of Hades. Hermes, the messenger, arrived with his winged sandals, his face a mask of nervous diplomacy. He brought a command from Zeus himself. The maiden of spring was to return. The world was dying. My mother's tantrum had finally threatened the balance of Olympus. I met him not in the fields of Asphodel, but in the throne room, standing beside Hades. I was not wearing the white peplos of a maiden, but a gown the color of twilight. When Hermes addressed me as Kore, a voice I did not recognize as my own answered him. "Kore is no longer here," I said, the words echoing with the authority of the cavernous hall. "You are addressing the queen of the underworld." The messenger was taken aback, but he pressed, speaking of the dying mortals, of my mother's unrelenting winter. A part of me, the part that still remembered the warmth of the sun, felt a pang of guilt. But a deeper part, the part that had found its strength in the dark,
knew that returning to that cage, to that performance, would be a death of a different kind. Before I gave my answer, Hades stepped forward. In his hands, he held a pomegranate, split open. Its seeds glowed like captured embers in the gloom. He did not speak. His eyes simply met mine, and in them I saw no command, no trickery, only a silent, profound question and a promise, the promise of a shared crown.
This is the moment, the turning of all worlds. You hold the fruit in your hand. It is heavier than you expect, weighted not with magic, but with destiny. The choice is impossibly simple, yet it holds the fate of seasons. Remain a flower, beautiful but fragile, a symbol controlled by another sun, or become the roots, hidden and strong, that anchor two worlds. You raise a seed to your lips. The taste is bittersweet, a shocking burst of life in the land of the dead. And in that instant, you are bound, not by a trick, but by a treaty, your treaty.
I chose, not one seed swallowed in haste or ignorance. I chose 6 deliberately. A single blood-red jewel for every month of the year I would claim as my own. I sealed my own fate. I forged my own crown. When I ascended, riding the chariot of obsidian beside my king, the world of light assaulted my senses. The sun was too bright, the air too loud. And there she was, my mother, her face etched with a grief that had aged a goddess. When she saw me, her first instinct was to run, to embrace her lost daughter. But she stopped. She saw not the frightened maiden who had vanished, but the queen who had returned. She saw the shadows that now clung to my robes, the ancient knowledge in my eyes. She saw the crown of obsidian thorns that now rested upon my brow. And she saw that I was no longer hers alone. "You ate the fruit of the dead," she whispered, the words a final desperate plea. "I ate the fruit of my kingdom," I answered, my voice calm and unshakable.
A compromise was struck. A law of nature was written. For 6 months I walk the world above, and my mother's joy brings forth the spring and summer. They still call me Kore then, and I let the flowers bloom, a final, fond farewell to the girl I once was. But when the leaves turn to fire and gold, when the air grows crisp with the promise of frost, I return. I descend not as a captive, but as a ruler returning to her throne. The mortals call it winter, a time of death, but they do not understand. It is a time of quiet contemplation, of memory, of rest, the necessary silence before the song of life can begin anew. My world is no longer just marble and incense. It is also obsidian and starlight. I am the bringer of life and the guardian of its end. I am the bridge between two realms. I am Persephone, queen of the underworld, and for the first time, I am whole. I am home.
For true power is not found in endless light, but in the courage to embrace one's own shadow, to rule it, and in doing so, to find the balance,
the beautiful, necessary balance that allows all worlds to turn. To find the balance, the beautiful, necessary balance that allows all worlds to turn. The stars fall silent once more. May their echo guide your path.
But the closing of one tome is merely the invitation to open another. Your journey through this realm does not have to end here. If your soul now yearns for the clash of steel and the fury of a final war, the lore keeper awaits by his hearth to share the echo of a last battle. Or, if you wish to delve deeper into the mysteries of fate and power, I can reveal the forgotten truth of the heroines who weave the destiny of gods and men.
Choose your path, traveler. And if you wish to ensure that no legend is ever truly forgotten, join our order. Become a guardian of the echoes.